Electroculture. Is it based in science or is it just a bunch of oogie boogie? Why don't you join me and we're going to take a deep dive into it and see what the experts say and what the research says. Hi, and welcome back to Blue Gypsy Homestead. My name's Louie. If it's your first time here, welcome. And if you've been here before, welcome back. As promised, I'm going to go a little bit into the whole subject of electroculture. It's something that's piqued my interest. It's something that's come back into my life actually, and it's kind of a strange story. But when I was a kid, essentially, I was probably reading a chemistry book. Yeah, that was me, and I read something about how, might have been biology, how cells contained electrical impulses. So I had a plant. It wasn't doing well. So I thought, well, why don't I just try this, a small amount of electricity, and see what happens? And so I hooked up a battery. I believe it was at the time 9-volt battery, square 9-volt battery. And I took the two wires and stuck them into the soil separately. They weren't touching, and that's important because if they were touching, then they would heat up. It's not what you were looking for. So I just stuck them into the ground. And within about, I would say, 2 weeks, some new leaves started to appear. And it's kind of strange. I thought, oh, okay, this is great. And the plant did actually recover. Needless to say, I'd accidentally stumbled into the world of electroculture. So personally, you're faced with the question, is this real science or is it just a bunch of oogie boogie, as Adam Savage would say? And the jury's still out. I can only tell you what worked for me, as in, that particular experiment worked for me. But let's delve into it a little bit more, because there are people who've done a lot of research on this and there's still more going on. So essentially, electroculture is defined as using electricity to stimulate the roots of a plant. So where does this electricity come from? Well, there's essentially 3 places it can come from. From the air, from the earth, and a power source, much like my battery. So let's talk about the air first. Nikola Tesla was incredibly brilliant, and he wanted to provide the world with free electricity because the earth has natural electricity, very, very small amounts, but when you add it all up, it becomes something significant. Anyway, so now, of course, we have things like cellular phones, we have satellites. There's so much more energy in the air that this becomes a little bit more plausible, but just take that with a grain of salt. Now, there's another school of thought where it's the energy given off by people. You might be familiar with the concept of auras, for example. So that kind of natural energy could also theoretically be captured. So that's basically, that covers off very, very high level, covers off the aspect of the air. Now, the second set is the earth itself. Now, if you've done any basic science, you know that the earth has a magnetic force. And at the core of it is iron. And of course, that magnetic force is what essentially protects us from solar radiation. So that energy is there. And in order to tap into it, you would have to find a way to harvest it. And so using magnets with plants would also give you the opportunity to attract some of that magnetic energy from the earth. Now, please, at this point, I need to clarify, all of this is theoretical. Don't take it to the bank. I'm telling you right now, there's a lot of experimentation still going on. Some of it's interesting. Some of it, not so much. And the third one, of course, is the one I've already discussed. This is the power source. So you can either take a battery of some sort and place conductors, pieces of wire, pieces of metal in the ground next to or near several plants and send that electricity into the ground. That would be essentially the best way. Now, what I neglected to mention about the air, that one of the ways you would capture the energy from the air is you would build an antenna. Now, there are, on the internet, it's on the internet, it must be true. On the internet, you'll find many designs for antennas. This is just one. And these antennas are designed to capture the energy that flows through the air. This is one example. Not a very good example, but an example nonetheless. There are some links that I'm going to put at the end of the video that's going to give you a better idea of the different antennas that are out there, and you'll be able to look them up. And I would encourage you, if nothing else, to just play around with it. It's not going to cost you much. It's going to cost you basically copper wire. So the question is, does it work? And the jury's still out, as I mentioned. There are a lot of people doing some very serious research, serious as in they are dedicating real time, real effort into determining whether or not electroculture is a viable option. Now, I'm going to read this one thing from a website called Electroculture.life. Again, links in the description. What is electroculture? Electroculture is a simple method of applying atmospheric-free electricity to significantly increase plant growth using basic materials like copper wire and or magnets to vitalize the soil and increase yields by 100 to 300%. It also eliminates the need for fertilizer and pesticides. Explain that it's not the electricity as we know it, but a breath of energy which stimulates and increases the fertility of the soil. Okay, I'm calling BS on this. Now, I'm not an authority, but I can say that I've seen on a couple of YouTube channels that I do trust the increase in yields, 100 to 300%. I don't know. Double? Yes, I've seen it. Does it eliminate the need for fertilizer? No. Does it eliminate the need for pesticides? Well, let me explain. The answer, I think, is no. Again, let me explain. When it comes right down to it, using electroculture is a complementary approach to farming or gardening. Complementary in much the same way as naturopathic methods are. Complementary to the medical field. Do you use, strictly speaking, the medical field? No. There is ancient knowledge that's been passed down. It complements the medical interventions. Will naturopathic solve burst appendix? No, but there's a lot of resources out there. And it's interesting. I've spent the last couple of days, maybe a week, going through the various resources that are out there, looking at the different things that are there. There's a Facebook page out there, Electroculture Beginners to Advanced Community. That's on Facebook. I mentioned that there's the website called Electroculture.life. Now, there's a couple of other websites out there. Again, rather than reading them out here, I'm going to just basically say, check it out in the description. It'll be there. Okay, let's touch on the idea of eliminating fertilizer. And that's a big nope. Will it eliminate fertilizer? This is a tough one because this is going to get some people pretty angry. And I apologize in advance, but hear me out. Fertilizer isn't necessarily chemical fertilizer. Now, as I've touched on in a couple of the small videos that I posted, compost, for example, is an excellent fertilizer if it's done right. And again, it's got to be done right. Just take a look at that particular one and you'll see the whole composting thing. The second thing is wood ash. Wood ash is another way of basically making your soil, amending your soil to make it better. The wood ash also takes care of some of the pests. Now, you would want, especially ground pests, things like snails and slugs and things like that. If you sprinkle a light spread of wood ash around the base of the plant, it will definitely irritate the bodies of the snails and the slugs and that sort of thing. So they're not going to want to go near your plant. So that you've eliminated the ground-based ones. Now, when it comes to, by the way, that also includes caterpillars, since they have to crawl across the ground and crawl up to eat your leaves. But if you're talking about bugs that are flying, then what you need to do is, case in point, tomatoes. One of the things that works very well with tomatoes, and this is something I've done, is I've planted marigolds. Marigolds give off some kind of a scent that absolutely drives bugs crazy. They hate it. So they stay away. Maybe that's part of the reason that my yields are up, because the marigolds are there and the plants are able to survive. So the bottoms are not getting chewed away because of the wood ash. The leaves are not getting eaten by the caterpillars because of the wood ash. The bugs are not landing on the leaves as much because of the marigolds. There's no silver bullet. It's important that you realize that whatever approach you take, you can't make it your only approach. I mean, if you want to experiment, that's great. I would definitely encourage you to go out there and try, if you have the ability, try a couple of, plots of, maybe even containers. Actually, containers are probably the best way of doing it. Try a couple of containers where you would try the electroculture, put the antennas in. Again, take a look at the websites. You'll see some of the smaller antennas. So go into that and take a look to see what's out there. And so you do one container with electroculture, do another container without. Now, the reason containers work really well is because they have the scientific approach of isolation. The containers are isolated. So the electroculture, if it is in fact effective, will not affect a separate container. It can't. There's no connection between the two. Now, if they were in the ground, you can't get accurate results. So if you're really, really geeking out on this and you really want to find out, go find a couple of containers, build a couple of small electroculture antennas, and try out the electroculture for yourself. And if it works for you, I'd love to know about it. Send me a comment. So that's this installment of Electroculture. I will do another installment when I start putting the antennas in the ground. I am going to continue studying it. I'm going to create another video when I start putting the antennas in the ground, or building the antennas, putting them in the ground, that kind of thing. And so you'll be able to see what I'm doing. That's not necessarily the best way of doing it, but you'll see what I'm doing. And then you can either pattern yourself after it, you can look at it and go, no, and then move on, which is, fine by me. There will be another video, and it'll be a follow-up video. So with that said, if you enjoyed just hearing me babble about this, please give the video a like. Feel free to leave comments. If you've tried electroculture, I'd love to know about it. If it worked, if it didn't work, I don't mind. Either way, I want to know. Share the video with your friends, and if you would be so kind as to subscribe. As I've said many times, we are trying to grow the channel, and your subscriptions, which cost you nothing, and the subscriptions really help us. The more views our videos get, the more frequently they come up in the suggestions. So I would really appreciate, again, a like, and that's pretty much it. So with that, I'd like to wish you a great afternoon, a happy planting, and all the best. Until next time, take care. Bye.